Hello, and welcome to the Wheel of Crime podcast. This podcast is ran by two ladies who play games, mumble profanities, and laugh way too often. Also, this podcast does cover topics of sensitive nature, and as such, listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to another episode of the Wheel of Crime podcast. My name is Jen.
My name is Emily. Hello.
Yes, here we are. Another week, another day.
A whole 7 days come and gone, and here we are once again this Friday day.
Wow, we're so high energy today. Wow.
Yeah.
It's astonishing.
It's wondrous. Well, Ms. Jen, what have you been up to this week?
I mean, would it be crazy if I said I was just working? Because, that's a thing that I never do.
Oh, yeah, no, you never do that. That's shocking.
It is shocking, truly. Still got a shopping problem. Been looking at things that I don't need, but I'm probably gonna buy. And that's about it.
Also relatable, still working. I've had to take over some new responsibilities, and it's a lot. I do not like. I have learned that I don't actually enjoy learning things.
You know what? I completely understand, because learning things is hard, and
it's a lot of work for no reason.
Yeah, and I would prefer to just do nothing, honestly.
Yeah, like if I could find a way to just be paid for existing and nobody has to know who I am, because I know what people are going to say. They're going to say, Emily, but people get paid to be on social media. No. People have to do things on social media to get paid to do that. I want to do nothing.
Yeah, I just want to be I just want to vibe, and someone's like, you know what? Here's $1 million.
Literally, I want somebody to look at me and be like, wow, you're cute and lucky. You never have to work again. And have me be like, oh, yes, finally.
Yay. I finally feel appreciated.
Right? And then, what was the other thing about learning new things? It's, different. Obviously, it's different if you're learning out of, your own personal interests. But, it's just even the thought of going back to school or something for college or university to learn something or take a course feels like such a burden sometimes. I'm like, man, why does everything gotta be so hard?
See, I feel the opposite. I have been contemplating going to grad school because I have decided that I don't know if I like working, and I think I'd rather just be in school forever.
See, my thing is I don't love studying or anything like that. I'm perfectly content to work if I know exactly what I'm doing every day and I just have a set of a to-do list to do. That is my jam.
Yeah, I don't know. I prefer school over work. It's just, I would rather be doing that right now. But here I am, working instead.
Yep. And working with lots more cool items in your life, and
it makes it a little easier, not gonna lie.
It definitely helps.
Yeah, that's the one thing. As a student, I was poor. I couldn't afford anything. As a working adult, there are many things I can afford, and I do enjoy that.
It is quite marvelous, if I do say so myself. Yes, I am also in the same boat with the working and the shopping still, because I've got problems. Anything new, though? Nah. Not really.
Wow, we're really exciting.
And not every day can be exciting, I guess.
We're here to deliver the mundane to you.
Yes, I hope everybody's really excited to get turned this Friday listening to us talk about our mundane lives and mundane activities. Woohoo! All right.
But we can bring you some non-mundane, well, probably not murder because it's Emily's episode, but non-mundane something.
Non-mundane, lightly criminal activity.
Barely criminal activity. Questionable activity.
Excuse me, we're called the Wheel of Crime, not the Wheel of Murder. I'm within my rights.
Oh, okay, yes. Are you going to talk about speeding today, or just someone who looked at someone else wrong, or,
Hey now, our Puckawudgies were murdering people, so I will not hear this.
You know what? Fair enough. Let's just spin the wheel and see what we've got on the table today.
Let's do it. Okay. Do you think it's possible that there are undiscovered creatures existing in historical places of today? So places where humans have lived for a long time and we feel like we've already, like, gotten to know everything about them. Do you think it's possible that there's anything like animals that or whatever that we haven't discovered in any of those places yet?
I actually do. Like if you look at Egypt right now, there's been a lot of recent like huge archaeological finds about like whole ass temples that they didn't know were there and stuff like that. So I feel like it's really possible that we could, you know, not necessarily like living animals or something, but you could find something, some sort of artifact, some sort of like skeleton of something you never knew existed before.
Oh, for sure. And
also the ocean, really deep. We haven't explored that much of it. So I feel like there's probably something down there that we don't know about.
Yeah, I'm mad suspicious about the ocean too. I was just gonna add to your your historical finds comment that you made. See, I think I'm just gonna add a little bit to it because I kind of also think at the same time that the reason why we find this stuff later on is because the historical places get overlooked so often. Because people are like, oh, we'll find something new in a new place, you know?
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, well, we've already been to Stonehenge. Like, what else could possibly be there? And you don't actually know.
It's true. I feel like a lot of the historical sites, like, they were discovered, like, now, quite a long time ago for us. And, like, I think revisiting some of those places with our new modern technology, they could find some really interesting things at those places.
Oh, for sure. I'm, like, wildly interested in where, like, the temples you mentioned in, like, Egypt and all these other things. Like, I love seeing stuff like that where I'm like, oh, they found new things. I must know.
I must. Yes. Well, it's interesting because, like, a lot of those temples, they thought were, like, burial sites for, like, pharaohs and stuff like that. But they've never actually found any like pharaoh bones or whatever down there, so now they're actually leaning towards that they were like not used for that at all, that they must have been some other type of like community space or like like religious space or something like that, which is really neat.
Yeah, it's like so my husband is a little bit of a history buff, and he said that one of the, you can call it a conspiracy theory or whatever. I think it's just people coming up with theories on what they think is, like, out there. But I guess in, like, Egypt too, like, you know how you mentioned community spaces? Supposedly there's, like, old documents that talk about there being, like, a underground library somewhere around there that nobody's found yet either.
That would be really cool.
Right?
Hopefully they find that one day.
I know. It'd be really cool. All right, should we spin for our next question?
Yeah, spin away.
Oh, that was so spooky. I grabbed something thinking it was a part of the wheel, and it was the wrong texture. It's a piece of foam. We're good. All right. So, if you could live anywhere in Europe, where would you live?
In Europe.
Like, you're packing up today.
I'm a city.
You have to pick one place. Where are you going?
Okay. Well, I'm a city girl. So it's definitely going to be a bigger city, which there are many in Europe, thankfully. And, you know, I would probably pick, like, I don't know. I'd probably pick somewhere in France, mainly because I like their philosophy on working, which They take like hour-long lunches. They do like shorter hours. No work calls on the weekends. Like, I could vibe with that. And also, short flight or train trip to Italy to get some amazing Italian food. Like, sign me up.
See, I was gonna say move to Italy. That's where I would go. You just get on the train to come visit me in Italy.
I would be so okay with that.
Right? Because I would want to go to Italy, like, not just for the food, but like, I've learned that there's even just like the community culture is really, really nice, and people in general seem to be just like a lot happier with the amount of sunshine and other things there too. So I'm like, I could vibe with that.
Really? You see, this is so funny because I think I've brought this up a million times before, and I'll never stop bringing it up. Because when Emily and I went to Europe together, this woman only wanted to eat Italian food, and I said, would you ever want to go to Italy someday? And she was like, no, why would I go there? And I'm like, I don't know, because it's amazing, the food's great, the culture's amazing, like, beautiful, like, so many reasons.
Yeah, no, I actually just took a deep dive like a couple weeks ago where there was like a girl who was doing a travel blog, which like, yeah, I know, pretty specific, hey? But her deal was that she was like traveling around the Italian coast and like stopping in each of these towns and like giving like a preview into like what her experience was with like the differing cities and like the communities and the cultures and what everything looks like and what people do there. And I was like, wow, this is like so fascinating. Like she like stopped in at this place where it was like I really wish I could remember her name so I could tell our listeners, but like she stopped into this place too where they had like a really unique spin on like fettuccine pasta where they make it in-house and they do like a couple other different things with it, and like it's like very unique but like uniquely Italian. And I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, the Amalfi Coast is like on my list of places to go. It looks incredible. I already know the food in Italy is amazing. And you know what? It's a vibe.
Yep. And I really want to try those stupid little aerosol spritzes or whatever they're called. You know what I'm talking about. They're like the little orange drinks that people... Yeah, that people get when they're in Italy where everybody's like, they're bitter and terrible. I just want to try one anyways. It looks so pretty.
You know what? I can understand that. And I would support that only if I was on this vacation with you.
Well, of course, who else would I be with? What? I would go by myself? That's not fun.
You better not take anyone else, because, like, I want to go.
You're like, listen, Emily, because we will be going. That is the plan.
I am the one who suggested you go to Italy first, so therefore I also get to come. That's just the rules. Sorry, anyone else who wanted to go, but you're not invited.
Yeah, you got dibs. That's it. You just got dibs.
Exactly, I do. I got dibs.
Right? All right, let's spin for our next question. All right. So if you were supernatural in any kind of way, what would you pick?
I would love teleportation or mind reading.
Those are good ones.
Or, like, the ability, like, this would be cool too, kind of akin to mind reading, like, the ability to be, like, a fly on the wall in, like, a room where someone's having, like, a discussion and just, like, listen in, because I'm a nosy bitch, and, I would just love that.
No, I love that too. I would call you up and I'd be like, Jen, I'm about to go talk to this person. Engage your abilities. Tell me what you think.
Shapeshift into a fly.
Yeah, and then
tag along.
Sneaky little fly on the wall.
Exactly. See, if I was a shapeshifter, maybe I'd have the best of both worlds, because I could just be a bird and fly somewhere and then just, like, shapeshift into a fly and listen in. So maybe that's what I need.
Right? Shapeshifting would be a cool one. Let's see. Supernatural in any kind of way. There's so many good options. I do like your idea of mind reading. I feel like that could solve a lot of arguments.
Mm-hmm.
And
sure
then
could.
I'm trying. Every time I say the word supernatural, I just think of Sam and Dean Winchester, and I'm like, what will they do? Yeah, maybe
Literally nothing.
Yeah, my supernatural way of being is gonna be driving a black Chevy, whatever the fuck it is that they drive, Impala, a Chevy Impala, and
Listening to AC/DC
constantly every day. Yeah, that's gonna be my supernatural
on the
power.
road.
Yeah.
With fake IDs.
With fake IDs, yeah. I wish I thought about this question more when I wrote it down. I don't know.
You gotta go with your gut. What's your gut telling you?
My gut is saying teleportation or mind reading. Because I'm sick of trying to guess what people are thinking, and I want to travel somewhere.
It just also, like, the ease of, like, I wish I could just transport directly from my bed to work. That would save me so much time in the morning.
Right? Just the convenience of it. Or even, like, oh, I need to go pick this up from, like, the post office, but I don't want to go through the half hour it takes to get there, pick it up, and come back when I could just have it right now.
Exactly.
Right?
So, that would be great.
Right? All right, we got one more question left. You ready?
Yes. Spin away.
All right. If a good friend of yours said that they were attacked by a supernatural creature and had evidence, would you believe them?
Maybe. I think it would depend on the evidence.
And
like
the person.
You trying to convince me that you've seen I don't know. I don't know why I have qualms saying it. You're the one who got the problems.
They're called Windy Boys.
Sure, a Wendy boy. I don't think I believe you. I'm sorry. Sorry to break the news. But, like, I could be convinced if the evidence was compelling. I don't... Where's the proof?
See, that's my thing, is that I only wish that I'd had this on video, like, when I did see the Windy Boy. Because if I had that shit on camera, you would have seen exactly what I was describing, and you'd be like, that's not right.
Who's to say?
Who's to say? But for me, if I was going to believe somebody, it would depend on who the person was who was telling me this, and then what the evidence was, I think. Those two factors would be very important to me. Because if it's just like somebody I've seen like twice, and they're like, I found Bigfoot, and then they like show me a picture of what looks like a sleeping bag hanging in a tree, I'm probably going to be like, I don't think that's Bigfoot. Sorry, friend.
Were you really high when you took the picture?
Yeah,
that could be your problem.
What were the circumstances? How did we get here?
Yeah.
All right, so then, do you feel like you could guess what my story for you is today?
I feel like some sort of European cryptid was discovered at a historical site, or they were like, there's some sort of like historical aspect to this story, I'm gonna guess. And there's some random creature that I've never heard of, I'm gonna guess. Or maybe I have vaguely heard of it.
It's possible.
They do their cryptid things.
They be cryptid. Well, I will read out my description for you, and then you can figure out if you've heard of them before. I'm thinking probably not, but there is always the chance.
All right, take her away, Em.
All right, so Spring-heeled Jack is an entity in English folklore of the Victorian era. The first claimed sighting of Spring-heeled Jack was in 1837, and later sightings were reported all over the United Kingdom and were especially prevalent in suburban London, the Midlands, and Scotland.
Sure never heard of him.
See, I picked Spring-heeled Jack for my story today because it's springtime.
Wow, spring has sprung.
Spring hath sprung. And then also because I was pretty sure you hadn't heard of them before, but it's it's interesting to say the least. So, whenever you're ready, I'll get right into it.
Take her away, I'm ready. I'm buckled on in.
All right, sounds good. So, there are many theories about the nature and identity of Spring-Heeled Jack. This urban legend was very popular in its time, and due to the tales of his bizarre appearance and ability to make extraordinary leaps, to the point that he became the topic of several works of fiction. Spring-Heeled Jack was described by people who claimed to have seen him as having a terrifying and frightful appearance, with diabolical physiognomy, clawed hands, and eyes that resembled balls of red fire. One report claimed that beneath a black cloak, he wore a helmet and a tight-fitting white garment like an oilskin. So far, he's sounding like a little bit like how I look in the morning. Except for maybe sans claw hands. I don't usually have those.
You put them away. You just take them out at night.
Yeah, that's those are my nighttime hands. My daytime hands are much different. So many stories also mention a devil-like aspect. Others said that he was tall and thin with the appearance of a gentleman. Several reports mentioned
aren't all men kind of like that?
They're like, yeah, he's evil, oily, and has sharp claws for hands, but is considered a gentleman.
You're like, yes, what a vague description of every man.
See, my thing was I was like, that's really funny that they describe him as a gentleman, because it really makes me wonder what the other gentlemen of the time looked like.
Oh my god.
So
they're like, you know what? It's similar enough.
Yeah, they're like a par average. It's
like the vampire with the one long fingernail scraping it against the window.
I literally still think about that story sometimes. Because
I think about that story all the time.
Literally, I sleep with a window right above my head, and every now and again I'll be getting ready for bed, and I'm like, yes, one long creepy fingernail just scratching at your windows. Lovely.
That would be awful.
Terrible. If I ever, just as a quick sidebar, should I ever wake up in the nighttime to a long, creepy fingernail on my window, I will be having a heart attack. I will die on the spot. I will expire immediately. My ghost fleeing the building. Like, it will not come back.
That's a valid response.
You're like it could have, you're like, I would have reacted more personally, but that's pretty valid.
I'll allow it.
Right. So apparently he's a gentleman, and several reports mention that he could breathe out blue and white flames, and that he wore sharp metallic claws at his fingertips, which we already talked about. At least 2 people claimed that he was able to speak comprehensible English, unlike me today. In the early 19th century, there were reports of ghosts that stalked the streets of London. These human-like figures were described as pale, well, before I get too far into this, there's a reason why I'm doing this. So, that's what Spring-Heeled Jack looks like. Now I'm getting into the history of, like, what was going on in London around the time that this started. So, to start with, there had already been rumors of ghosts going around. So, these human-like figures were described as pale. It was believed that they stalked and preyed on low pedestrians. The stories told of these figures formed part of a distinct ghost tradition in London, which some people have argued formed the foundation of the later legend of Spring-Heeled Jack. So, Spring-Heeled Jack is basically, in ideology, a amalgamation of a bunch of, like, different ghost stories that were going around at the time, of, like, people who were being attacked by ghostly figures at nighttime. So then they just all ended up attributing them to Spring-Heeled Jack instead.
Lucky him.
Yeah, he gets all the blame, and none of the celebrity status. Or no, he gets some old celebrity status. We'll get into it.
All the blame and none of the acclaim, if you will.
Yes, quite clever. The most important of these early entities was the Hammersmith Ghost, which I actually covered the Hammersmith Ghost a long time ago. I think probably a couple years back.
I have no memory of said ghost.
The Hammersmith ghost was this ghost that people kept saying that they were seeing along the street called Hammersmith, and they thought it was like a guy who was like playing dress up, but then he would like disappear randomly in the street and stuff like that. It wasn't a very good story that I gave you, but I did share it at one point.
It slipped my mind for some reason.
Right? So then the Hammersmith ghost, which in 1803 and 1804 was reported in Hammersmith on the western fringes of London, and it would later reappear in 1824. Another apparition, the Southampton ghost, was also reported as assaulting individuals in the nighttime. This particular spirit bore many of the characteristics of Spring-Heeled Jack, and was reported as jumping over houses and being over 10 feet tall. Which is very tall.
That is very tall.
For a person.
Tall boy.
I don't know how I would react if I saw a 10-foot tall ghost man chasing me in the street. Probably the same reaction as if a long creepy fingernail rap-a-tap-tapped on my window.
You know what? Also valid.
Right? The first alleged sightings of Spring-Heeled Jack were made in London in 1837, and the last reported sighting is said to, in most of the secondary literature, to have been made in Liverpool in 1904. According to much later accounts, in October 1837, a girl by the name of Mary Stevens was walking to Lavender Hill, where she was working as a servant after visiting her parents in Battersea. On her way through Clapham Common, a strange figure leapt at her from the dark alley. After immobilizing her with a tight grip of his arms, he began to kiss her face while ripping her clothes and touching her flesh with his claws, which were, in accordance to her deposition, cold and as clammy as those of a corpse.
I don't like that. I don't like this guy.
No.
So he is not a gentleman.
No, that is what I'm saying. They're like, yes, the sharp clawed fire gentleman, and then he's like jumping out of the alley to rip a girl's clothes off with his cold, creepy hands.
Ew, like, get him out of here. Throw him in jail.
That's what I'm saying. So, in panic, the girl screamed, making the attacker quickly flee from the scene, and the commotion brought several residents who immediately launched a search for the aggressor, but they could not find him. The next day, the leaping character is said to have chosen a very different victim near Mary Stevens' home, inauguring a method that would reappear later in reports. He jumped in the way of a passing carriage, causing the coachman to lose control, crash, and then severely injure himself. Several witnesses claimed that he escaped by jumping over a 9-foot-high wall, while cackling with a high-pitched, ringing laughter. Gradually, the news of the strange character spread, and soon the press and the public gave him the name Spring-Heeled Jack.
I feel like he doesn't deserve the name.
No.
I wonder, also, sorry, just to interrupt you, if the reason they called him that had anything to do with Jack the Ripper.
They don't mention Jack the Ripper in any of, like, Spring-Heeled Jack's, like, history, because they're considered to be separate, but there are a lot of similarities.
Yeah. Like, this kind of feels akin to that, if you will.
Oh, yeah. Well, especially because, there's also, like, the whole part where it's, like, attacking women and, like, all these other things in dark alleyways, and nobody's really able to see who he is, but he seems to somehow manage to always get away, climbing over these, like, stupidly high walls, so, like...
It kind of feels like one of those things where the folklore is created because of, like, what's happening in culture at the time, and how, like, it's, like, almost reactionary to, like, people are trying desperately to find an explanation for, like, this chaotic thing that's happening, and so they're, like, making up these other stories to, like, find some level of comfort with it, or, like, some level of, like, oh, it's resolved, or we know what this is.
I think so, too. And I think it's almost like an answer, too, for a lot of people, because more than anything else, like in all these stories that I cover with, like, mythology and legends and folklore and cryptids and whatever, it's always people looking for answers, right? It's people being afraid of the unknown and they need something. So then it's like if there's been a bunch of murders happening or people getting attacked and you don't know who it is, is it not easier to blame something potentially supernatural, and you're hearing ghost stories already, and it's like, oh well, maybe the ghost stories are all just this one guy.
Right? And, like, also maybe it's easier to blame it on a ghost rather than thinking another person could be doing this type of thing.
Oh, for sure, especially for people who might have people who commit crimes like that in their day-to-day life. They would might way rather believe that it's a ghost that's going around killing people than their brother or their dad or, some other member of their family, right?
Or, like, their neighbor.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally, yeah. So those are the, like, official early reports. So those are ones that were actually given in the courts. So next is the official recognition of who Spring-Heeled Jack is. So a few months after these first sightings, on the 9th of January in 1838, the Lord Mayor of London, Sir John Cohen, revealed at a public session held in the Mansion House of an anonymous complaint that he'd received several days earlier, which he had withheld in the hope of obtaining further information. The correspondent who signed the letter, a resident of Peckham, wrote, "It appears that some individuals, as of the writer believes the highest ranks of life, have laid a wager with a mischievous and foolhardily companion, that he durst not take it upon himself to the task of visiting many of the villages near London in 3 different disguises, a ghost, a bear, and a devil, and moreover that he will not enter a gentleman's garden for the purpose of alarming the inmates of the house. The wager has, however, been accepted, and the unmanly villain has succeeded in depriving 7 ladies of their senses, 2 of whom are not likely to recover, but to become burdens to their families. At one house the man rang the bell, and on the servant came to open the door. This worse than brute stood no less a dreadful figure than a spectre clad most perfectly. The consequence was that the poor girl was immediately swooned, and never has from that moment been to her senses. The affair has now been going for some time, and strange to say, the papers are still silent on the subject. The writer has reason to believe that they have the whole history at their finger ends, but through interested motives are induced to remain silent." So I'm just going to explain to you what that means. So This writer, who is the resident of Peckham, who chose to remain anonymous, is basically suggesting that this Spring-Heeled Jack character who's been going around and attacking women is somebody that the elite are trying to protect, who they know who it is, and he has been going around and attacking women, and it sounds like he had successfully assaulted a few of them. There isn't, like, quite an explanation as to, like, what that could mean, but that 2 of them were unable to recover. So his insinuation is that the elite know who he is. They have recommended to him to not get caught. So he had, like, 3 different disguises in this guy's report, where he would either dress up as, like, a ghost, a devil, or a bear, so nobody could recognize, like, who he was. But he was doing all the same things in all these different places, and they're all centered around London.
I mean, I feel like that would make sense why he's described as a gentleman if he is someone of, like, elite class.
Mm-hmm. And, like, other disguises, too, like disguising his hands, disguising his face, wearing strange clothing, somehow always being able to get away, right? So that's the insinuation.
It would be like having access to those resources, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the insinuation that this writer had in, because that's supposedly at the time, like, what most people thought was going on was that the lords and ladies and, like, upper class knew who it was and were working to protect him, and that's why the newspapers weren't saying anything either.
That would make sense.
Right? So then, next we have the 2 best-known incidences of an encounter with Spring-Heeled Jack. So they're called the Scales and Alsep reports. So perhaps the best known of the alleged incidents involving Spring-Heeled Jack were attacks on 2 teenage girls, Lucy Scales and Jane Alsop. The Alsop report was widely covered by the newspapers, including a piece in the Times, while fewer reports appeared in relation to the attack on Scales. The press coverage of these 2 attacks helped to raise the profile of Spring-Heeled Jack. So, the Alsop case. Jane Alsop reported that on the night of February 19th, 1838, she answered the door of her father's house to a man claiming to be a police officer, who told her to bring a light, claiming, "We have caught Spring-Heeled Jack here in the lane." She brought the person a candle and noticed that he was wearing a large cloak. The moment she handed him the candle, however, he threw off the cloak and presented a most hideous and frightful appearance, vomiting blue and white flame from his mouth, while his eyes resembled red balls of fire, which is a description we read earlier. So, Miss Alsop reported that he wore a very large helmet and that his clothing, which appeared to be very tight-fitting, resembled white oilskin. So far he sounds like a motorcyclist, but let's continue.
He sounds ugly AF.
Yes, super not cute. Without saying a word, he caught hold of her and began tearing at her gown with his claws, which she was certain were of some metallic substance, and she screamed for help and managed to get away from him and ran towards the house. He caught her on the steps and tore after her neck and arms with his claws, where she was then rescued by one of her sisters, and then the assailant fled.
That's a spooky encounter I would not want to have.
Right? And then, too, just while I was reading this, I was remembering something else from that anonymous letter that I forgot to touch on. So he also said in that letter that this Spring-Heeled character knew which houses to visit because they were either primarily women in the house, or he knew where the woman would be. If there was like a house where like a man was there or a man answered the door, he would disappear. Like he wouldn't even like go up to the door.
Bother.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like someone who has access to resources and information to me.
Right, I thought so too. So then we have the Scales case. So on February 28th, 1838, 9 days after the attack on Miss Alsop, 18-year-old Lucy Scales and her sister were returning home after visiting their brother, a butcher who lived in the respectable part of Limehouse. Miss Scales stated in her deposition to the police that her and her sister were passing along Green Dragon Alley. They observed a person standing in an angle of the passage. She was walking in front of her sister at the time, and just as she came up to the person who was wearing a large cloak, he spurted a quantity of blue flame in her face, which deprived her of her sight, and so alarmed her that she instantly dropped to the ground and was seized with violent fits which continued for several hours. So her brother added that on this evening in question, he had heard the loud screams of one of his sisters moments after they'd left the house on running up on Green Dragon Alley. He found his sister Lucy on the ground in a fit, and her sister attempting to hold and support her. She was taken home, and he then learned from his other sister about what had happened. She described Lucy's assailant of being tall, thin, and gentlemanly appearance, covered in a large cloak and carrying a small lamp or bull's-eye lantern similar to those used by the police. The individual did not speak, nor did he try and lay hands on them, but instead walked quickly away. Every effort was made by the police to discover the author of these and similar outrages, but several persons were questioned. Yeah, yeah. But then they were all set free. All the people who were questioned. So,
how convenient.
Is it kind of starting to come together now on who people think why Spring-Heeled Jack was able to get away with what he was doing?
Yeah, sure is.
Very mysterious. See, I was trying to figure out too when I was reading up on this story about like what the deal is with like the red eyes and the blue fire stuff. I think that he might have been using just like like just some kind of substance to like confuse people or something. Like if he had access to like an apothecary or something, because they had chloroform and other things too back then that they were using for different things, right?
Yeah. Like something to like give them hallucinations or something.
Or just incapacitate them. Like, maybe the blue flame is him blowing whatever substance that he's holding in his hand, like, at them.
That's true. That's true.
Right? So, it's interesting, though, and then, you know, all these interesting little pieces about the police stuff and all that, and it's curious, if anything.
I'm suspicious, but I think I might know where this is headed.
Yes, so... in the beginning of the 1870s, Spring-Heeled Jack was reported again in several places distant from each other, though. In November 1872, the News of the World reported that Peckham was in a state of commotion, owing to what is known as the Peckham Ghost, a mysterious figure quite alarming in appearance. The editorial pointed out that it was none other than Spring-Heeled Jack who terrified a past generation. Similar stories were published in the Illustrated Police News in April and May 1873. It reported that there were numerous sightings in Sheffield of the Park Ghost, which locals also came to identify as Spring-Heeled Jack. So, this news was then followed by more reported sightings, until in August 1877, one of the most notable reports about Spring-Heeled Jack came from a group of soldiers in Aldershot Garrison. The story went as follows. The sentry on duty at the North Camp peered into the darkness, his attention attracted by a peculiar white figure advancing towards him. The soldier issued a challenge, which was then unheeded. Then the figure came up beside him and delivered several slaps to his face. A guard shot at him with no visible effect, and some sources claim that the soldier may have fired blanks at him, while others say that he missed or had fired warning shots. The strange figure then disappeared into the surrounding wilderness with astonishing bounds. Lord Ernest Hamilton's 1922 memoir, 40 Years On, mentions the Aldershot appearances of Spring-Heeled Jack, however, says that they occurred in the winter of 1879 after his regiment, the 60th Rifles, had moved to Aldershot, and that similar appearances had occurred while the regiment was being attacked at Colchester in the winter of 1878. He then adds that the panic became so great at Aldershot that the sentries were issued ammunition and ordered to shoot at the night terror on sight, following which the appearances ceased. Hamilton thought that the appearances were actually pranks carried out by one of his fellow officers, a Lieutenant Alfrey. However, there is no record of Alfrey ever being court-martialed for this apparent offense. So, I did read a pretty big blurb there, but the parts that you can take out are when they were finally doing news reports on this. One of the most notable ones came from the police news, and then now all
that
of a
doesn't
sudden,
seem biased at all.
That doesn't seem, yeah, right? And then this whole Aldershot thing where they're talking about how, like, this apparition came and was, like, threatening the garrison or whatever, seems a bit fishy after all these other stories where it's like, okay, well, he attacks women. Why would he go to where there's a bunch of armed men?
It seems like it's a cover to try and, like, throw people off.
Yeah, that was my thought, especially because, like, police and army were kind of interchangeable in that era a little bit, depending on what people were doing. So it's like, makes you think. All right.
It feels like staged so that they could be like, oh yeah, look, we're trying, and now we're gonna, publish some news about it finally.
It's not just you guys that are seeing him. He's just a ghost. These boys up at the barracks saw him too.
Yeah, like, I'm sorry, but I'm suspicious.
Yeah, right? So there's that deal with the soldiers. Next, in the autumn of 1877, Spring-Heeled Jack was reportedly seen at Newport Ark in Lincoln, Lincolnshire, wearing a sheepskin. An angry mob supposedly chased him and cornered him, and just as in Aldershot a while before, residents fired at him to no effect. As usual, he was said to have made use of his leaping abilities to lose the crowd and disappear once again.
It's weird because, like, I feel like the first, like, few accounts, he's, like, very meticulously targeting women alone at night in the shadows, which is, like, obviously going to be easy for him to get away.
Yeah, and has a certain like, MO where he's, like, ripping at their clothes and doing other things.
And now it feels like there's, like, these other things which feel more staged because it's, like, obviously, like, why? Why would he all of a sudden be going after men in crowded areas and, like, making himself more known, if not to discount who he actually is? You know what I mean?
Yeah, right? It's definitely got a little bit of stank on it. I was interested to see what you were going to think about that. So then next we have, by the end of the 19th century, the reported sightings of Spring-Heeled Jack were moving towards the northwest of England. Around 1888 in Everton, North Liverpool, he allegedly appeared on the rooftop of St. Francis Xavier's Church in Salisbury Street. In 1904, there were reports of appearances in nearby William Henry Street. And that's about that.
People are like, we saw him. He's doing good.
Literally, like, they didn't have any, like, there was no juice to it. They basically were like, yeah, we seen him standing on the church once. And that was it.
See, I feel like for me that further perpetuates that, like, you know, at that point he had moved from, like, an actual man committing crimes to, like, an idea.
Right.
That people are like, oh yeah, I totally saw him, or like, you know.
Mm-hmm. So then I have a small little blurb about what theories people have come up with regarding Spring-Heeled Jack, but obviously we'll go over it at the end too, just to flesh out what we learned today. But basically, nobody was ever caught and identified as Spring-Heeled Jack. Combined with these extraordinary abilities attributed to him and the very long period in which he was reported to be at large, this has led to numerous and varied theories of his nature and identity. While several researchers seek a normal explanation for the events, other authors explore more fantastic details of the story to propose all kinds of paranormal speculation. So, an example of what that would be is a variety of wildly speculative explanations that have been proposed to explain the origin of Spring-Heeled Jack include that he was an extraterrestrial entity with a non-human appearance, and features the retro-reflective red eyes or phosphorus breath, as an example, and the superhuman ability deriving from life on a high-gravity world, while his jumping around and strange behavior, and that he was a demon accidentally or purposefully summoned into this world by practitioners of the occult, who made himself manifest simply to create spiritual turmoil. 14 authors, particularly Lauren Coleman and Jerome Clark, list that Spring-Heeled Jack is a category named phantom attackers, with another well-known example being the Mad Gasser of Mantoun, which I'll have to look into that one day and see who this man is. Typical phantom attackers appear to be human, but may be perceived as prosaic criminals, but may display extraordinary abilities, such as Spring-Heeled Jack's jumping abilities, which, as widely noted, would break the heels of any human who tried to replicate them, and or cannot be caught by authorities. Victims commonly experience the attack in their bedrooms, homes, or other seemingly secure enclosures. They may report being pinned or paralyzed, or on the other hand describe a siege in which they fought off a persistent intruder or intruders. Many reports can readily be explained psychologically, most notably as something called the old hag phenomenon, which is which is like, I did take a brief look into that because I was like, what the fuck is this? It's basically more or less a phenomena that, like, it sounds very like female hysteria type thing.
Gotcha.
So it's recorded in folklore and recognized by psychologists as a form of hallucination. In the most problematic cases, an attack is witnessed by several people and substantiated by some physical evidence, but the attacker cannot be verified to exist. So that's a fun fact for you. And then in closing, I'm just going to tell you about a Spring-Heeled Jack of another country very quickly.
Ooh.
So
He's traveled.
He's a traveler. So a similar figure known as Perak, the Spring Man of Prague, was reported to have been seen in Czechoslovakia around 1939 to 1945. As writers such as Mike Dash have shown, the elusiveness and supernatural leaping abilities attributed to Perak bear a close resemblance to those exhibited by Spring-Heeled Jack, and distinct parallels can be drawn between the two entities. The stories of Perak provide a useful example of how the traits of Spring-Heeled Jack have a broad and cultural resonance in urban folklore. Perak, like Spring-Heeled Jack, went on to become a folklore hero and even starred in several animated superhero cartoons fighting the SS, the earliest of which is Jiri Trinka's 1946 film Perak, a SS or Springman and the SS. And that is my story about Spring-Heeled Jack. And I would love to hear what your theory is on the deal with Spring-Heeled Jack.
I feel like he was like an actual dude committing crimes. I feel like he either had ties to, like, he definitely had ties to the police somehow. I'm not sure if he actually was a police officer or if he was just wealthy enough to pay them off and kind of like
Yeah.
run with them. Either way. I feel like it could go either way. And I feel like it just morphed into... I feel like almost it got set up to be turned into a supernatural thing, probably by the wealthy people making up these stories to make it seem like, oh, these peasants who are getting sexually assaulted are crazy. It's just a ghost. It's all in their head.
Yeah, and two, I didn't even include this in my notes just because, so many of the articles that I was reading about it, like, included pictures. There was a huge propaganda campaign that followed Spring Heel Jack being like, be aware at night, don't leave at night, lock your doors at night, Spring Heel Jack's coming for you and for your kids. But it was all about Spring Heel Jack, and there's like all these depictions of him with like these huge long claws, like jumping off of buildings, like attacking people and stuff, and all these like propaganda things. And I was like, who's paying to have these posters put up of Spring Heel Jack, the mysterious jumping ghostly sharp man, you know?
See, that just screams a way for the wealthy people or, like, the policemen or, like, the government to control the general population.
Oh, for sure. So, like, your theory is basically also my theory. I'm fairly certain that there's some type of involvement from the police, like you said, whether it's somebody who's wealthy enough that the other wealthy want to protect him, and he also has ties to the police, and he is just getting away with attacking women, and they're trying to cover for him, and it just morphed into some kind of folklore from their propaganda campaigns. But I also half wonder about the Jack the Ripper vibes that I get off of this. Mm-hmm. It almost makes me wonder if... Because I'm not sure if he directly would have a tie to Jack the Ripper, just like year-wise. I didn't really look that up. But, like, it makes me wonder, though, if maybe one of the reasons why they didn't find Jack the Ripper is if it was a similar situation where they were being protected by the elite.
It could be, honestly. Like, I feel like it happened a lot. And because police work wasn't where it is today, I feel like it would be really easy to cover something like that up. It's as easy as not asking the right questions or not really doing a thorough investigation or, you know...
Yeah.
Not looking too hard into things.
Or even just, like, having the money to be like, oh, I will literally pay you to not say that.
Yeah.
I will literally pay you to tell people that I came in today and talked to you, even though I'm not going to do that.
Exactly. And there's no cameras. Like, there's no real way to prove that. There's no, you know, charged your credit card here at this time. Like, there's no paper trail like that necessarily, you know? Right. If there's a receipt that can be easily destroyed, like you can throw it in the garbage or put it in flame and it's gone. Yeah. No trace.
Right? So that's my thing too, is like, I'm suspicious about that, and I would love to see if there is like some sort of Jack the Ripper connection like down the road or anything like that. That'd be kind of cool.
That would be kind of cool.
Yeah. But that brings us to the end of today's episode. If you like today's episode, make sure to give us a review on wherever you're listening to podcasts today. 5 stars does help and gets us out there to meet new listeners, so that's greatly appreciated. Beyond that, we also have our Patreon, which is Wheel of Crime on Patreon. You can donate there and support us that way. Next, we have our social media, which is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, all at Wheel of Crime. So then if you want to send us an email, our email is wheelofcrime@gmail.com. Just if you want to put in your own theories. Maybe you know a lot more about Jack the Ripper and Spring Heel Jack than we do, and there is some ties that you want to talk to us about. I would love to hear them. You can send us an email about anything and everything that you want to talk about. But yeah, if you have a personal story you'd like to submit to the podcast for a listener episode coming up in the future, then you can just go and submit all your story details on our Google form, which is attached to our social media links. And I think that's everything.
I think I'm pretty sure. I don't know.
I cannot remember anything else, so I'm just gonna close it here.
Yes, that's it. That's all. We'll see you next week for another new episode. Okay, bye.
Bye.